That Sober Guy podcast contains adult content, merciless truth, and emotional nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
Yo, what's up? Thank you for tuning in today. Thanks to Humans for bringing us in. Thanks to you for supporting the show. I'm Shane Raymer, and you're listening to That Sober Guy podcast, and we help people stay sober. We're coming to you live from San Diego at the Innovations in Recovery Conference. And in this episode, we're talking to Senior VP of Marketing at Promises Behavioral Health, Kathy Frossard. And Kathy has 35 years of experience in the healthcare industry, along with some great insight into a changing industry, as well as some phenomenal leadership skills that we're going to talk about, and a lot of experience there, what it means to be a leader, how do we support people without trying to fix them, all that good stuff. And she's a damn good time too. We had a good time chatting on the beach yesterday at the opening reception. So yes, we're going to do that. And before we get to her, be sure to check us out at thatsoberguy.com. You can also connect with us on Instagram at RealThatSoberGuy and on Twitter at Shane Raymer. So a lot of people always ask too, what is Innovations in Recovery? It's about everything new in behavioral health care. So why are we here? We're here to bring you some of the top experts and recovery advocates to help inform you on what's going on in the recovery community, as well as the treatment industry, and of course, have some fun. If you want more info about any of Foundation's other events, whether it's Moments of Change, Innovations in Recovery, you can go to foundationsevents.com and you can find some more information there. Last thing, finding the right treatment option for addiction and mental health illness can be tough. And that's why we've continued to partner with Foundations Recovery. They stay true to their mission, hold high ethical standards, and provide treatment in a nationwide network of residential and outpatient programs. So if you or a loved one needs some help, you can go to foundationshelp.com/soberguy, or you can call 833-81-SOBER. That's 833-81-SOBER. You can talk with an admissions coordinator about treatment options. They can answer any questions for you, and I promise you'll be in good hands. Kathy Frossard. Did I say that right too, Frossard?
You did.
Okay,
you
I thought
great.
so, yes. Welcome to Sober Guy. It's so cool to have you on. So great to meet you in person finally, and I really appreciate you taking some time today.
You bet. I'm very excited to be here, and as you know, I'm a big fan.
I know, it's so cool.
I know. I was so excited to meet you face to face.
Yeah.
So very great to talk about these things, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. When we first started chatting, it's always cool to hear like, oh yeah, like I listened to the show before, because I talk to some people and we talk and they haven't exactly heard kind of the vibe of the show. So it's always nice when somebody knows the vibe, that it's very open and free right. thinking, and we talk real talk, I guess, around here.
Yeah, I think that's what I love about it. The real talk.
Exactly. So you have over 30 years, right? 35 years.
It's crazy.
35 years in the healthcare
and
industry.
I'm only I was 2 when I started, as you know.
That's right. Oh, I knew that. Yeah, totally.
Okay,
that was exactly
cool.
right. Yeah. Make sure we get that out of the way so everybody knows out there. Yeah. So you're 37. But I mean, so what got you into healthcare in the first place? You were a nurse before, right?
I was. So, when I was growing up in the middle of the Midwest, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I know I failed half the secretarial classes I took. So I'm like, what should I do? And so I started working actually at a nursing home and taking care of patients there, and just went into nursing and really quickly learned that what I was really into was education and training and connecting people. So really went down that road after that.
Yeah. And the nursing home, that's got to be a tough gig too. I've been, we've had friends and family members who have actually been in a nursing home, and so we've been in there, and we would talk often about that, like doing a job like that. That's a difficult job, I'm sure, being in there every day.
It is, I think, but what's really kind of neat to me about what we do now and what I'm doing now and working in addiction, it's really hard to choose a nursing home. So families are trying to figure that out. That patient is trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And we talk about insurances and communities and costs and all that thing.
Yeah.
So, which is exactly where we're at today here.
Yeah.
And
totally.
how do we choose a treatment center, and how do we go about getting the right thing that's going to be clinically appropriate, but also just that personal appropriate, right? For success.
Totally. So what makes you passionate about working in recovery and treatment? Any personal experience or just something that you kind of fell into? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so there's probably a million reasons I could say. I don't know anyone who's not touched by addiction or that trouble, but I've had some definitely very personal experiences. My husband, who's my ex-husband actually now, but unfortunately the struggles that went through that, and watching what happened as he tried to get sober and tried to find that path, how we had very little support. And so I'm really invested in growing that support and growing that path from wanting to get treatment or maybe needing to get treatment and getting into treatment. So that's part of it. Yeah. And then I actually have a lot of family members who have behavioral health problems and have addiction problems. So there's that component as well. Yeah. But then there's one more thing that I think is the most pure to me, and that is that I know that no matter what you do, the journey in life is a challenge. And so when someone is trying to get help and move on and make changes, how do we get there? And so that's really where it brought me into working here.
I think too, one of the things you pointed out right off the bat, and that after I asked that question, was it affects everybody. So it's funny because it's actually not funny, but everywhere I go, whether it's at work, in corporate, industry, the grocery store, my kids' school, wherever the hell I go, most of the time this comes up. What do you do? You know what I mean? What do you, and so obviously I'm in recovery. I'm very open about it, and I mean 99.9% of the time, you would think that the person that you're talking to, it doesn't affect everybody, but it does. And almost every time that person says, "Oh, my brother, my mom, myself,"
Right.
It does. It touches families all over the place, and opening up about it and talking about it, which is why I'm so open about it, even at workplace or wherever. I think it helps to break down some of that stigma.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought something was really interesting when I first started talking to people about treatment centers is that everyone who understood what happened in a treatment center was in the treatment industry. And I loved the idea of coming not in recovery.
Yeah.
I'm not in recovery. I'm very honest about that. But why can't I be just as passionate? Why can't I make just as... Wait a minute. We should all make that much of a difference, right?
I agree. Yeah.
And so to me, that's how it all connects, right?
Yeah.
It is just a huge spiderweb of connections, and we should all be involved in it.
When you get to see the outside perspective of it and dealing with your ex-husband as well, there's something that everybody can bring to the table in recovery. Like I think we had talked a little bit about this before. My wife Jess, she comes on the show often, and she done her own 12-step, and I got out of treatment, came home, and I wasn't fixed, but I had this new thing. Well, where does that leave our spouses? Where does that leave our family members who, are still, they didn't get that help, you know what I mean? How to deal with somebody who is struggling with addiction. So I guess they say it's a family disease a lot of the time, and that really does ring true. Do you guys work? So when people come into treatment, is there a lot of family support most of the time?
There is. I think I'll use the example of the ranch in Tennessee because I'm from Tennessee, so I'm really passionate about that. So the really importance about connecting the families to support the families, but also to teach. And to do it together. The person who's in recovery, working to go through recovery and get into recovery, but also working in that family group. So when you go to the ranch, it's on this huge lot of land, and there's one house that's at the very top of a hill. And that house happens to be the family group session. And it's not a couple of days, it's actually 4 days. And it's that participation of putting the family back together and supporting each other. I get so excited about that. So anytime you're helping the family, anytime you're connecting, because that's where my end of this comes in.
Exactly.
It's the thing I'm the most passionate about.
Yeah. So what do they do? For an example, at the ranch, they take the whole family in for almost a week and actually go through how to deal, how to cope, what are triggers for your spouse or your loved one, all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
and also how do you support as you get out? I mean, I think a lot of families first time around will feel they're going to be cured when they get out of treatment.
Totally, yeah.
It's a miracle, right? They forget that this is a lifetime experience. And so that's one of the first things they learn. And then just understanding how do you support that? And what do you do to help that person be successful and to remember to treat them without judgment going forward, just going back.
Which is hard sometimes if they were a real asshole.
Amen, brother. Yeah.
But that's the, and I think that's where the learning experience comes in for all of us, patience, tolerance, all that stuff. Let's talk about leadership a little bit. You're an amazing leader. I've only heard good things about you from a couple different people that I connect with at foundations. To you, what makes a good leader?
I think a really good leader is willing to understand the value of each person in the team. And or just that value of that unique person, and look for those little things instead of always just looking for what they want as a leader. Like, I want this result. Well, that result's important, but what's really important is everyone has their strengths. So I'm really kind of into the strength finder issue, you know, the idea of that find my strengths in the people that work with me, and I'm going to win. I mean, we're always going to succeed. And I hope that people find the strengths in me and then understand that my weaknesses are my weaknesses. It's okay. Everyone has them, right? Yeah,
everyone does have them. Everyone has their strengths on the opposite end. But how do you get people to do stuff if nobody wants to be told what to do, right? Especially my 8-year-old. She's her own. She's her own little lady. So I'm learning even in that stage as a parent, like, how do I guide her and help her make these decisions on her own? So she doesn't feel like I'm telling her what to do, you know, and that's a big part of being a leader. I feel like, whether it's in a father, a mother, or in business. Right.
It's funny. I actually think a lot about I have 2 daughters. They are 27 and 28, so they're grown adults and they're very successful in their worlds. And one lives in Denver, Colorado, and one lives in Austin, Texas. But you may think, wow, do I even see them? I live in Nashville. So here's how I've guarded my success with my girls, and now I'll tell you how I do it with my employees. But I like both of their individual, unique parts of them.
Because they're different.
Because they're very totally different. One is a hairdresser in downtown Denver with lots of tats, and the other one is a school teacher. She teaches high school math.
Oh, yeah, that's wow. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's totally 2 at different ends of the spectrum right there.
And yet we're such a close family unit. My husband, my daughters, and I, our group texts would crack you up, or they at least crack me up, which is on a regular connection and a regular basis. But what I really knew when I was that we did a good job in something. We know we screwed up in a bunch, don't get me wrong. Lots of past issues. We're not going there. But I would say that the reason we knew we felt like we've done a good job is because they call us and talk to us about what's going on or when they're trying to make a decision. And just like my employees do as well, I don't necessarily give them the answer because old mentors in my parents' age, you're supposed to just believe everything they said. Done, right?
That's it. What I say, that's it. Yeah, you don't question it, don't ask. Like, I'm the boss.
But we're different mentors in this day and age, and we recognize that people, no matter what your age, have value. So let's talk about like what you're thinking and where that path might go wrong. And then my oldest daughter, who has been through quite a bit of therapy, she's very fond of saying, why doesn't anybody know coping skills? What is wrong with this world? They should teach that in kindergarten.
Yeah, they should too.
They really should.
Yeah, totally. All the way up through high school.
And don't we all worry about that every day? So I really do treat my employees just like I treat myself, and I know that I have weaknesses and strengths. I know that I'm going to recognize where your strength is. If we can work together to come up with good solutions, then we're going to get there. And isn't that what I do with my daughters, with my husband, with my own personal life? And I do call people on their shit.
Yeah, that's good too. And I think being open and honest like that helps build not only respect, but build strength up in individual skills and the team too. You can't, that's, I guess, enabling if we're not calling shit out, right? I mean, in some sense, what situation it is. And I want to say too, maybe there's someone out there listening right now who's in recovery, and they're just focused on the recovery, and they're going, well, what the hell does leadership have to do with this? Well, it really does have a lot to do with it, because whether you're working with a sponsor, eventually maybe you'll be a sponsor one day, maybe you lead in your household as a parent, maybe you're at work, there's all kinds of things that it kind of falls over into. And I think one of the other questions I had was like, we try to fix people a lot of the time. It's not my job to fix anybody. The more I try to fix people, the worse it gets. I've tried with like family members and stuff. I finally learned that, like, okay, not my job. How do you lead without trying to fix someone if they have something that's jacked up?
So I think one, frequent communication.
Yeah.
Right?
So being open, honest.
And being willing to listen to the thing you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Right?
That's hard sometimes too.
Oh, it's so hard. But I do think listening is like the most important skill set we can gain, right? And if you can just listen and not try to answer everything in your head, just hear that person out. I think that's really one of the most important skill sets. And then we can connect that. And I know sometimes probably the person I do it the least with is my husband. I'm like, yeah, I know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
But, which is really true.
Yeah, it's true with Jess and I too. That's why I'm laughing right now.
So, but, if I can apply that in any part of my life where I'm just going to take a moment to listen, and then maybe I can figure out what's going wrong. And then the other thing I like to think of is scenarios. So when someone's telling me something that's going wrong or I don't like the way they're going, I start trying to walk scenarios with them. So, like, how did you get there? Like, how did you get that thought pattern? How did you take step A to step B? Yeah. And so let's walk it back. And sometimes we can find a different path to go in. And I think that's what a lot of people need to do, like, when they're going through recovery. Sometimes we have to walk it back.
Totally.
And walk it forward in a different direction.
Yeah.
And so why not do that with every people that all the people you interact with?
Well, while you're leading them in the same... Well, actually, let me say this too. I feel like there needs to be like a good balance of personability there too, in order to build that trust and relationship. So sometimes I feel like we can let titles like get in the way of stuff when and people will they can't be themselves. I guess I'm more or less talking about in a work environment to some extent. Where it's like, why can't we just ease up a little bit and be ourselves to some extent? And I think that forms that stronger bond versus like, let's just come to work and put our heads down and just do our job. You know what I mean? I mean, we've got to do that too, but there's got to be some sort of balance there and trust and relationship, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I have a really good, manager, Marlene at PG&E where I work at, and we have that relationship, like where I can open up about stuff. Same with her. Sometimes, I think you and I talked about this too, sometimes I'll get on a conversation that's supposed to be 20 minutes and 2 hours later we're going, what the hell? What did we just talk about? But I mean, it's not always a bad thing because it does build that trust. And it sounds like that's something that you really take to heart too with your teams and people that you lead. Yeah,
I think there's 3 great things of every great leader. Besides all the ambition and the direction and whatever you're going, to me, it comes with transparency.
Yeah, that's good.
As much honesty as possible, because sometimes you can't share everything.
Yeah,
but you can be honest about what you do share.
Exactly.
Right? So transparency, honesty, and then that communication, listening to each other. If I find a lot of leaders, if they're afraid of what that person's going to respond with, they just don't say anything. Yeah. Or they just don't like return your call or return your email or whatever that is. Yeah. Maybe it takes a little bit of a little bit of confidence. Yeah. And a little bit of guts. But sometimes you just got to go right in. Yeah, go for it. Somebody taught me that in nursing school. They said when I first go out on the floor to take care of a patient, start with the worst patient first. Walk into that room that you're scared to death to take care of that patient. And then the rest becomes so much easier. Yeah. And I think it was a great skill they taught me. And I applied to everything. Did you like being a nurse? I did. I loved being a nurse, I wouldn't say that. I love the process of being a nurse and just connecting. And I love old people. I'm sorry. It's a thing. I just love them. But you know what I love most about old people? They tell you like it is. They don't care about social patterns anymore. I just talked to somebody here yesterday, and I think he said he was about to turn 70. His name's Bob. I can't remember where he was from now, but he was hilarious. And he came up and he said, we were kind of shooting shit or whatever. And he goes, I'm almost 70. I don't really give a shit anymore anyways. I want to retire. He was real honest, and he said it in a good-hearted way, of course. But you're right. They're very honest. Like, what do you got to lose? I mean, you've seen a lot of stuff, and, you kind of realize, I think that the small things, like, we shouldn't sweat a lot of the time. You know what I mean? Like, this life is short, so might as well have some fun. Yeah, that's exactly right. So think about it that way. I mean, like, every year I get a little bit older, I'm, like, that much closer to... Yeah. It's inevitable. One day we're all going, we're all going to the same place. Exactly. Well, if we kind of roll into, some industry stuff, like one of the main conversations going around here is everything's changing, right? So maybe can you kind of give a rundown on like what like the treatment industry looked like to where it's headed today? And I don't know if that's it, maybe just as brief as you want, or if you want to go into detail, feel free. But and just an idea. So I have a great opportunity to have a view of coming in right at the end of kind of the heyday of when things were going really swell. Yeah. Most everybody was had to private pay because insurances didn't even recognize addiction, so they weren't paying, right?
It wasn't,
And then treatment centers had to be really beautiful, which was a key to it.
Got to have water by them, right?
That's exactly right. That's a law.
Couple palm trees. Yeah. Maybe a fire pit.
Exactly. And then I came right in when bad press became a number one topic of the day, right? When people started talking about the opioid crisis like it was a curable, instant thing.
Yeah.
Because if we just hold the pills back, nobody's going to be
exactly.
addicted.
It's going to work.
Yeah, it's perfect, right? So I came in right at that time, so it gave me some great perspective. I'd had my own personal experience around the idea, and then there's this whole idea of watching the business part of it.
Yeah.
So when I think about the changes, I actually think the changes took everybody by surprise.
Yeah. It seems like it came out of nowhere almost.
But did it?
I don't think so, though.
I don't think so either.
But maybe it happened fast. I don't know.
Yeah, I think everybody thought everything was just going so swell.
Or maybe there was a big denial factor that it was changing. Maybe that's what it was.
In this industry, do you think?
No, no way. Yeah. Oh, it's
So,
funny.
yes, I would go with that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Actually, I was talking yesterday. I had a group talk about just how we help people get into treatment yesterday.
Yeah.
And I talked about my top 5 kind of things of what I think changed the industry. So now what we are is we're really focused on less about the amenities and more about the true treatment and the outcomes. In my opinion, I think that's one of the big parts of it. Not that people didn't care before.
What was it, the top 5? I'm just taking a couple little notes
That's
here because
okay.
that's good.
My top 5.
Yeah.
Number 1, bad press, bad media. I mean, you can't, if you scroll through 2020 shows, I guarantee you're going to find at least a few on a bad treatment center and how they were enticing people to come into treatment and how they were helping people get drugs or, or they won't.
Sad.
It is. But do you know how such a small amount of the people that are out there providing treatment are that?
Yeah.
So tiny. And so I would build on top of that when I talk about the bad press. I would add to the opioid crisis discussions. And then I would add to that one more thing is politics.
Yeah, totally.
Everybody's trying to have that voice without talking about anyone getting into recovery.
Yeah.
So little talk about people getting help.
Yeah.
So much talk about how everybody's done everything wrong.
Totally. I think that blows over into even outside of the recovery industry in itself. Just bad press and media is what sells, unfortunately. You know what I mean? And so they just blow every little thing up and make it this huge deal. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of anxiety and fear over that because they take it to heart. And it's like you said, there's always going to be a bad apple on every tree. To quote the old cliche probably my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather came down.
Yeah.
But for real, that's part of it. But so I had a bad press, politics. What were the other ones?
So I'll say that's the first piece that starts to erode trust in people trying to seek treatment, right?
Okay.
So the next one is negative talk. So because everybody was feeling so pressured in this industry, they started to kind of get inclusive where you didn't want to talk to people outside the industry because nobody understood what you were doing.
Yeah.
So the negative talk actually started to create around within the industry with people talking treatment centers, oh, that one closed or this one's in trouble. Or so again, now that conversation becomes
gossip.
Negative gossip.
Yeah.
And what do people love to hear more? Negative gossip, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Absolutely. What? You know what? And then it's like the old game of telephone too. One thing starts on one end and by the time it gets around to the end, it's a completely different story, maybe blown up 10 times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you got the conspiracy theory around that, which part of negative, that if somebody tells you something simple, it can't be true. So you're obviously not telling me everything.
Totally. What's
conspiracy,
the rest of it? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
So that builds and erodes trust more, right? So those two things are happening. And then the next thing that happens, I think, is really interesting, and that is that the questioning about how people are paid, how treatment centers pay their employees, how treatment centers get reimbursed for things, all this like looking into the business aspect, and that question of like, oh, wait a minute, nobody's regulating this group. And so regulations kicked in. So we don't have a lot of regulations, but we do have regulations that I think are very important.
Yeah.
But all you again is hear about the negative people who can't follow those regulations.
Totally.
So that's my number 3. I think that really erodes trust a lot. And and then my final two just really come down to people in general. So a lot less people are feeling confident about selecting a treatment center. So what do? You got the internet, you're searching, right? Or you may hear word of mouth. And so it starts to become competition.
Yeah.
And competition changed this industry a lot. Instead of everyone kind of in that same goal, that kind of hit in as well. I think all of these things, by the way, could be flipped, and they're often really good.
Totally.
If we can think about it. So, and my last thing is really just this idea of we have this stigma, right? And now the treatment centers have a stigma against them. And so now, I guess the voice that people have are the most important things that we can do, and not enough people are really speaking because they're afraid that talking about change might be saying that what they did before was wrong.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say what anyone did before was, well, maybe a few of them, but what anyone, well, maybe a few. I don't be but I don't see everybody had a purpose, and that's to helping people start in their life of recovery, right?
Totally.
And so we've heard all that. And I think the most important thing we can do is people like yourself, people like myself, we need to have this conversation out loud.
Yeah,
we need
totally.
to talk about the fact that these things have happened. We're living in those worlds. And let's turn that conversation around so that we can talk about the good things that people are doing.
It's kind of funny, like, as you're saying this out, and those are really great, by the way, so I made sure I took a note of each one, and I'll probably talk a little bit after, but that's a really good example of just recovery in general. Like, okay, so just take me as a person who struggles with addiction. I had to go in and dig out all the bad shit and stuff from my past and stuff that I did and that I didn't do, all that stuff, in order to move on and get past it and start to focus on what my real purpose is and mission was and the person that I really am. Kind of sounds similar to that in that same aspect. Like, we have to have those conversations and get some of that past stuff that's old now out in the open. And I wonder if a part of that is, and I can't remember, I talked about this with one of the other guests earlier today, but how, I think it was Harry Nelson. He just wrote the book, The United States of Opioids.
I have heard about
liberating a nation in pain. So we had a good conversation, but one of the things we were talking about was how it's hard to speak up now about stuff sometimes because there's a lot of fear that people their reputations are going to be hurt, their businesses are going to be hurt. So I think it all depends on each individual situation, of course. But having these conversations is extremely important. So if you got a voice out there, speak up, get off your ass and get after it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Yeah. How about
Definitely.
that? I don't know. I have realized that I have a little part in this whole thing, and I love to try to do my best at that. And it sounds like you do too.
I hope so. I want to give it my best shot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's what we can
I've definitely chosen to get over any kind of fear of speaking on the internet or talking to people or just sending out messages because I mean, really, I know I'll make mistakes.
Absolutely, we all do. Yeah, that's what makes us better.
That's what makes us better.
Yeah.
Learn to that next section. That's right.
So if someone out there is listening, and maybe they're entering into a leadership position, maybe they're going to sponsor somebody and they've never sponsored someone before. I think the concept of leadership is kind of the same. What advice would you give somebody?
Well, first, I think check yourself.
Yeah.
Are you ready? I mean, it is a lot, as we all know. And for us to be able to help someone else, we have to be good where we are right now today. And
big.
I think that's important in treatment. I think it's important in leadership.
Yeah.
I mean, in friendship and marriage and all that stuff. We kind of have to be ready for that, right?
Yeah.
But I think probably the next few things I would say, let's talk about probably the top three, and that is just, I think you have to be okay with being open and listening and learning from that person you're with.
Yeah.
You've got, you can learn from them and they can learn from you. And so you guys will both get further for it versus just one of you getting further from it. We're not a parent or a teacher or God. for the record.
Yeah, just to be clear out there. Yeah.
So go ahead and be comfortable with who you are, and understand that we're not going to tell someone how to get better. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah, we did.
You can't tell someone how to take steps.
I've talked to friends and family, so I've been blue in the face about what they could do, what they should do. Thankfully, I don't do it anymore, but early on, and it came from a place of love and wanting to see them, improve, and knowing that there's help out there and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's not my decision on what somebody does or what they don't do. It's up to them. So I think that's a good point, because we get lost in that, and that's even when the codependency starts coming in. I'm going to fix that person. And it's like, no, you're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And my third thing is to come from a point of love, care.
Yeah.
I mean, even as an employer or, as a leader in a group of team, you really got to care about those people. Because I guarantee if I have someone that I don't care as much about, I'm not helping them any more than I'm helping me.
Yeah.
It's just, I got to care about what's going to happen with them, or where they're going to go, or how they, and I get excited when someone gets a great job and leaves me, not because they leave me. Don't get me wrong, I love
succeed.
Loyalty. I want them to stay. But how cool is it that they move on to the next thing that's even better?
Yeah.
And I had a great CFO when I first kind of came into working in, actually in education, healthcare education, and he always celebrated anyone as they moved on to another great opportunity.
That's awesome.
And so it's like a big network that we have from that group as well. And so I think get excited about that. Get excited about helping someone move on to that next step in life, and that's good, right?
That's good. Yeah, that's good. We need people like that. Sometimes we don't have people that build us up. We got to hang around people like that.
Boy, people are good at tearing you down, though, aren't they?
Absolutely. They sure are. Yep. That's most of it.
Number one skill.
I got to say, that's one of my wife's gifts. Man, she has a gift of speaking into people. I like that a lot. So sometimes that's something that we're working on our own personal stuff too, but she is just so damn good about, hey, if you come to her with a problem, whether it's, she's a hairstylist as well. So she's also a therapist, right? Because she sits in the hairstylist chair. Exactly. So she comes home exhausted some days too, because just, talking and, but she's so good about just speaking into people and building them up and telling them it's going to be okay and that they can, God's got a plan. All that's just she's just great at it. So we need people like that. And thank God I have her. She does that a lot for me, and it's important. It's a really important thing. So anything else you want to add? Anywhere anyone can get in contact with you? They can check out Promises.
Absolutely.
So give it a plug.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about Promises. In all honesty, I think it is really important. The most important thing we do as a treatment provider is that we have to commit to what we're doing for the person who seeks treatment. Yeah. And we have to accept anybody where they are and where they need to go, And so for Promises, I get really excited about sharing that message. Yeah. I really want to, it's funny, I want to say this. I really want to promise that no matter where you go to treatment, that taking that first step is the right step. No matter how crappy it is, no matter how much the road's going to be struggling, it's the right step to start it. Yeah. And I promise the next step's going to be, a little bit better, right? A
little bit at a time.
And getting a hold of me, one of the best ways is honestly just pop in on LinkedIn if you've got that going on, because it's just Kathy.Frossard. And I do a lot of postings and a lot of sharing on that. So I love that kind of connection, and you can reach me at Kathy.Frossard@promises.com. So awesome. Super excited. I'm just so grateful again. I'm a big fan. Guys, he's amazing.
So sweet. Thank you.
So in the mission and the vision and doing this,
thank you.
It means a lot. So thank you for letting me come on.
I appreciate all your support and encouragement, and thank you. It was really good to meet you in person finally and stuff too. So hopefully we'll chat again. You can check us out at thatsoberguy.com. I'll put any links for Kathy in the show notes. So if you want to check those out at Promises or find her on LinkedIn, connect with us on Instagram at @RealThatSoberGuy, on Twitter at Shane Raymer. And thank you again for tuning in. I love you guys. We've got a lot of good responses and messages and communication this week. And I know you guys are doing well out there and sticking to it. So thanks again. Peace, love, respect. Good luck.
Keep my head on straight. I've been trying to keep my head on straight. about you. Oh, I don't know anything about you, but I know what you do in the back room. And you still say that I don't know anything about you.